You want to know how you can tell everybody going through it right now? Look, $10. $10. What does this one say? $20. $10. Look, what else we got? $15. Who else? $19.
Welcome to Liberty Lockdown. Please scan your barcode. Your liberty ain't gone, but yeah, it's on hold. Where did it come from and where did it go?
The economy's never been better. I just wanted to remind you guys, Biden administration says so regularly, so it has to be true. I don't know why people wouldn't be filling up their tanks all the way, other than they're considering the environment, I'm sure. Because it's not as if once it's empty, they're going to go and get another $10. I mean, seriously though, when you are to the point of poverty where you're not filling your tank of gas, even though you're going to inevitably have to, wow, we're in rough shape, ladies and gentlemen, rough shape. I wanted to talk a little bit about the economy because there's a viral clip going around of one of Biden's top economic advisors who doesn't understand central banking whatsoever and also doesn't understand why they borrow money as opposed to just printing it. Oh my God, we're in so much trouble. But first I wanted to say I have seen a lot of charts going around of different locales, different state real estate markets. Arizona pops to mind, but there was other markets that I've seen too, where the year over year or the year over year for like 2 or 3 years in a row is up 200 or 300% in terms of inventory that's on the market. That is not a good sign. It's a good sign if you're a buyer. It's a good sign if you've been waiting for years and years, like many of you have, to try and buy something. But it's not a good sign for the economy broadly, and it's not a good sign if you own a house or multiple houses. So I just wanted you guys to be aware that this very limited inventory situation, which we've been dealing with ever since 2020 and before that, but it got really, really bad during 2020 with the eviction and foreclosure moratorium. It is now at a inverse of that, where inventory is hitting the market in some of these markets in an exponential fashion, 200 or 300% in terms of listings year over year or over a 2-year period. And that is cause for concern. And I think I know why, but I'll just give you kind of my brief analysis without doing much of a deep dive on it. I think that people are feeling the financial pain. And I think that also many of these markets were filled with Airbnbs and rental units. And because, one, the Airbnb experience is not good, unfortunately. I say this as a former superhost who had over 400 groups of people stay with me and really enjoyed the experience. Well, they stayed in my downstairs. They didn't stay with me, but I think that experience is not as good as it once was. I think that there's a lot of frauds and hoaxes that are put on there, people getting ripped off and stuff like that. So I think that's kind of diminished the amount of demand for Airbnbs. A lot of people are going back to hotels and just saying, screw it, I don't want to deal with this Airbnb nonsense. But also, I think that the interest rate hike has started to bear fruit. It's not exactly surprising. I mean, this is exactly what I told you guys would happen, is that eventually the Fed would hike rates aggressively enough that the mortgage rates would be increased enough that demand for housing that supply of housing would start to come on the market, because more and more people would start to say, okay, this looks like a good time to buy, or like it looks like the market's probably at its peak, so let's try and get out. So that's what I see with these inventory units getting put on the market in places like Arizona. Is a lot of those homes are probably second homes, especially snowbirds. People from Canada or cold locales in America will buy a winter home in places like Arizona, especially the elderly, because they want to get out of the cold. So it's secondary homes, and then it's a lot of rental properties too, a lot of Airbnbs. So I think all of those are going to be the first things to hit the market. When you start to see actual softness in pricing, that's when you'll see additional housing inventory hit the market, because a lot of people that have just been scraping along will say, okay, well, the bottom's falling out. That's where you get the cascading inventory that hits. And whether or not it actually gets to a tipping point, I can't say definitively, but I would just encourage you, if you are a homeowner, to look at your market. Just pretty easy search. You could probably do it on Zillow. I'm sure there's other websites out there that'll allow you to do it, but go to one of these websites and search for inventory or units on market, and then search year over year, or look at, like, find a chart to see how much it has increased over the past 12 months, 24 months. If you are seeing it hit, significant highs year over year, that is a sign that you may have weakness in that market in front of you. So for your own consideration, this is not financial advice. Just want you to do your own due diligence and research and make sure that you understand the circumstances of probably your most valued asset, which would be your home. So make sure that you're staying on top of these things, because once it tips over, it will be rapid. No, whether or not it will actually tip over, I'm not sure yet. If I think it is, I will say so. I don't think we're there yet, but I think it could be in the offing. And I think that with the broader economic landscape being as fraught as it is, with inflation still running relatively hot, and everybody being employed, but everyone feeling poor because you can't, even though inflation has come down, you're still talking about year-over-year inflation that was 10% for many years, give or take. I mean, they'll lie and say it was 4 or 5 or 6%, but we all know it was much higher. So once you have multiple years, 3 years now, of, I'd say a fair average estimate is 10% annually. You're talking about 10%, but then you're talking about 10% on 110%, so that's actually another 11%, right, from the baseline. So now 21%, 22.2 or whatever. So you have 122%. That's now, so over 3 years, it'd be like 33%, 34% increase in pricing, broad-based, across the market. And even if you have it, the inflation rate comes down to 3%, that's still increasing on top of the other gains that have already made it so exceedingly challenging for you to continue to purchase the same things that you used to, like gas, like food, like clothing, everything that you need to, survive, basically. And that isn't relief. I mean, what that means is that, the pain that you're experiencing today is here to stay until and unless there is actually a tip over point where we see a banking crisis and unemployment shoots up and real estate drops down, and the stock market obviously would follow with that if there was a banking crisis. So I think that that's still a possibility. A lot of libertarians, a lot of economic advisors out there are analyzing this and saying to themselves, I think that we're en route to hyperinflation. I think we are too, just to be clear. But I don't think that it's inevitable that it is imminent. I think that we can actually see a deflationary spiral in the interim because the Fed has hiked rates as aggressively as they have, and because the debt is so astronomical, so astronomical. Just having a Fed funds rate of 5.5% is enough of a pressure on all assets across the board that you could see kind of a cascading default, as I've described. So stay frosty, ladies and gentlemen. Stay frosty.
The U.S. government can't go bankrupt because we can print our own money.
It obviously begs the question, why exactly are we borrowing in a currency that we print ourselves? I'm waiting for someone to stand up and say, why do we borrow our own currency in the first place?
Like you said, they print the dollar. So why does the government even borrow?
Well, again, some of this stuff gets, some of the language that some of the language and concepts are just confusing. I mean, the government definitely prints money, and it definitely lends that money, which is why the government definitely prints money, and then it lends that money by selling bonds. Is that what they do?
No.
They sell bonds. Yeah, they sell bonds, right? Because they sell bonds and people buy the bonds and lend them the money. Yeah. So a lot of times, at least to my ear with MMT, the language and the concepts can be kind of unnecessarily confusing, but there is no question that the government prints money and then it uses that money to Yeah, I guess I can't really talk. I don't get it. I don't know what they're talking about. Like, because it's like the government clearly prints money. It does it all the time, and it clearly borrows. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this debt and deficit conversation. So I don't think there's anything confusing there.
Mother of God, we are so fucked. We're so fucked. That is one of Biden's top advisors. He's a chair on the economic board to President Biden, and he doesn't understand how our treasury works, bonds work, nothing. He doesn't understand fucking anything about it. That is so deeply disturbing. I shouldn't be surprised. Why am I surprised? I don't really know. Why am I surprised? I shouldn't be surprised, but I still am. I'm still fucking surprised. How could you not know? Yeah, they don't. All right, first off, when they sell bonds, that means they're borrowing, okay? That means they're borrowing money. There's been this big debate, and the MMTers, the modern monetary theory fucking nincompoops, continue to ask aloud, you know, why do we not just print everything we need? Why don't we just borrow? Well, why do we borrow when we could just print everything? Well, the obvious answer is that if you were to just print everything, you would go into a hyperinflation death spiral for the ages. And when you're talking about trying to service over $1 trillion on our debt alone, that would be another $1 trillion that you're printing annually. It would be catastrophic. Not to mention, in doing so, it would signal to the market that you are no longer capable of carrying or servicing that debt. Therefore, all of the treasuries that you currently have out, which is trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars, would not be re-upped. Those would sit out there. There would be no buyers for them. Interest rates would go through the roof, and you would have to monetize the entirety of the debt because only a total lunatic would continue to buy U.S. treasuries. So that's the reason, doofus. Oh, this is the advisor to Joe Biden. Oh, my God. Oh, we're so screwed. But yeah. That's the reason, okay? So if anyone out there is wondering, if anyone didn't know that already, now you know. That's the reason. You can't just monetize the debt. This is also the reason, like a lot of people will say, well, if we're doing this, why do we even pay taxes? Well, the reason you pay taxes is because it takes a ton of the capital out of the market, it hands it to the government, which then theoretically could use that to pay down the debt or at least service the debt, which they do some of that. Well, if you didn't do that, all of those taxes that get sucked out of the market would be left in the hands of the consumer. The consumer would then go out and purchase additional things, which would increase demand, which would, because there's no additional supply that would be coming online, at least not rapidly, that would create price increases, which would feel like inflation, even though the inflation actually occurred years prior when the printing press went brrr. Get it? That's how it works, okay? I hope that makes sense. I hope I said it simply enough. I know every time I talk about economics, I try to boil it down as armchair economist as possible so that everybody can understand it. But that's actually how it works. And these people are so dangerously stupid, and they have absolutely no fucking right to be ruling over you, and yet they do. And I don't know how that injustice persists, but it has. And it shouldn't. But it does. So you have to prepare yourself and your family for the economic consequences that will result because these people are absolute morons, and yet they are in the highest positions of power. That's the only options you have. Speaking of morons in positions of power, we have Janet Yellen, who said something totally crazy just a few days ago.
Well, homeownership for people who don't already own homes, first-time buyers, is almost prohibitively expensive. First of all, mortgage rates have been so low for so long that it's created a kind of lock-in across much of the country where people don't want to sell their homes to buy new ones because they'll lose the benefit of the low mortgage rates they've locked in. And then with house prices having gone up, and now with much higher interest in mortgage rates, it's almost impossible for first-time buyers.
So actually what Ms. Yellen says there is fairly accurate. Here's the issue, though. Janet, from 2014 to 2018, if I have my years correct, you were the chair of the Federal Reserve. You can't lament the conditions of the housing market. You can't lament the fact that first-time homebuyers can no longer possibly even dream of owning a home without including the fact that, hey, those interest rates that were kept too low for too long happened under your fucking watch. That was your policy. You did that because you held the interest rates low for years for no reason. We were 5 years, maybe even more, out of the Great Recession. And you continued to keep rates at the zero bound or damn near at it. That is so, so dangerous. And now she gets up there as the head of the Treasury. So she goes from the head of the Fed to the head of the Treasury. She seems to have some grasp on the deleterious consequences of totally insane fiscal policy. And yet she doesn't take any accountability for the circumstances that were created by her. And if that doesn't infuriate you, I don't know why. I don't know why this isn't totally, absolutely hair on fire, infuriating to every single person, other than those that own tons of housing because they've benefited tremendously from it. But anybody else, I don't know why everyone isn't just outraged. It's terrible. You have robbed the future of our next generation. You have stolen it from them, handed it to the banks, handed it to the most wealthy people on earth, to the detriment of everybody else. And then what happens? Well, then the young people who have no financial future in front of them, they turn to socialism and they say, that's the only answer, even though what they're dealing with is socialism. Because the top market signal, interest rates, the cost of borrowing capital, has been manipulated. Not to mention the fact that the money supply is monopolized by these lunatics. They have ruined your lives, and then as a consequence of that, you turn to them and say, take more power. Can you understand how inverted that is? How illogical it is? The answer ought to be the exact opposite. You should all be fired. And in fact, you should all be prosecuted because what you did was felony level. I mean, it should be, if it's not, felony level financial malfeasance. Like if you have any duty as a fiduciary to this country, which you ought to, you should be prosecuted for fraud. Because that's essentially what this is. What are you doing? You're debasing the currency, printing trillions of dollars and borrowing trillions of dollars and keeping the interest rates too low for too long so that ultimately you create malinvestment across the market, which just devastates the youngest population. It's evil. It's evil. And they never look in the mirror and they never get fired and they only fail upwards. And that is all a byproduct of a totally sick system. A system that at its core is immoral. And the only way to remedy it is to end the Federal Reserve. Today's episode of Liberty Lockdown is once again brought to you by NadeauShaveCo.com. That's NADEAU shaveco.com. They are a veteran-owned, family-operated, single-blade razor company that is, one, a friend of the show, which is awesome. Two, super-duper based. They're total savages. And they happen to have a great product. You can minimize ingrown hairs, razor burn, and irritation with their 100% recyclable, plastic-free razors. Enjoy your shave. Stop sending your money to companies that hate you. Send your money to the most based razor company that has ever walked the face of the earth. That is, again, NADEAU shaveco.com. Promo code LOCKDOWN. Get yourself 15% off. NadeauShaveCo.com. Promo code LOCKDOwn. Just to give you some easier math to scale on how insane this debt situation is. According to the Kobayashi letter, which is a Twitter account that I follow, says, shocking stat of the day. The U.S. has added $100,000 in federal debt every second over the last year. Since March 1st, the U.S. has been adding a staggering $10 billion in debt per day. That's $417 million per hour, $6.9 million per minute, and $115,000 per second. So it's actually far higher than $100,000 per second. It's $115,000 a second. That's how much they're borrowing, ladies and gentlemen. As interest rate cuts are priced out, we could see $1.7 trillion in annual interest expense in just 1 year from now. Even if the Fed cut rates 6 times this year, interest expense will still hit $1.2 trillion next year. In other words, you will be seeing $1 trillion spent just to service the debt over the next 12 months, basically no matter what, unless there's some miracle. So that's crazy. Keeping in mind, tax receipts are $4 to $5 trillion. So that means that over 20% of our tax receipts, of the federal government's tax receipts, the money that they rob from us and take for themselves to allegedly spend on us, which they don't, over 20% of that is just going to go to interest. That means that it's just taken from you and handed to the creditors. That means that you get literally nothing for it. Nothing. Zero. In fact, you get negative because the money that you would have kept to use to invest in something or just buy yourself something, gone. And that also means that the economy doesn't get to circulate it, which would help with economic growth. It's just consumed entirely. So that's our future. That's our now, actually. That's our present. And I hate to start off a show with such a rough note on the economy, but it's really important that people understand the circumstances that we're facing. Like, these are intractable figures. Intractable meaning you cannot escape them. This is a math equation that has no solution other than monetize or default. And I don't see any intermediate option, like monetize the debt or default. And they're going to continue to try and find this middle ground, and they're going to try and continue to juice the numbers and make you feel as if the economy is doing better than it is. They're going to try because that's their job. At least until November, they're going to try. But I don't think it's going to, I honestly, I'm getting more and more nervous that we could see real economic, fallout is a good way to put it, before the election even, which obviously would have major consequences on the election outcome, potentially. So, I don't know. Just keep your ear to the ground, keep listening to the show. We'll continue to update you guys as best I can. I'm getting that queasy feeling in my stomach. A lot of people say, "Oh, you can't have a recession right before the election." It's like, like they can say, "Oh, we don't have those before." Like, yeah, we do actually. The Great Recession happened like 2 months before the Obama-Bush election, so it can happen. It can. Now they probably wanted Bush out, and they probably wanted Obama in, but I guess that wouldn't have been. Bush was out anyways. I think he was running against McCain, so. But they probably wanted Obama over McCain, so maybe they tipped it over early. But still, I'd be surprised if they can keep this thing on the tracks. Like, it is getting really, really perilous. So stay frosty. Some latest news from CNBC. Allegedly, Trump has narrowed down his VP picks to 3 top candidates: Senator Marco Rubio of Florida, J.D. Vance of Ohio, and Tim Scott of South Carolina. Eesh. We also have Doug Burgum, the governor of North Dakota, and another shortlister is Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota. Well, Kristi had a little dog fiasco last week, so I think she's probably out. Doug Burgum, rarely have I ever heard of you, Doug. No disrespect, but he's such a small state governor. I don't think that gives you any additional votes, so I don't know why he would go that direction. And then of the top 3, Marco Rubio, neocon extraordinaire, and also my senator, unfortunately. J.D. Vance of Ohio, which has... He's got some good things to say, but again, I don't see much of a draw, but maybe that's just from my libertarian vantage point. And then Tim Scott of South Carolina, which has never impressed me. He was running for president, and I thought he was extraordinarily lackluster during the debates. To me, the answer continues to be Vivek or Tulsi. I'm not advocating for either of them to be the selection. I'm just saying those are the ones that would actually at least signal to those that are on the fence and could be persuaded to vote for Trump to do that. So Vivek has that kind of, first off, he's got major star appeal. He's got the potential to be a legit presidential contender in 28. So if you're trying to fill your bullpen, so to speak, in the GOP, I think that's just so obviously the way to go, because you would have him. He gets to prove himself. Trump only has 4 years. It's not like he can run for re-election anyways, so it's not as if he can be challenged in any significant fashion by Vivek. So seems like a no-brainer to me, but from what I've heard, there's ego battles, and apparently Trump doesn't like that Vivek is, he shines in a way that could compete with Trump, which is an absurdity in my opinion. Tulsi, I have some positive feelings about, but I also have massive negative feelings about. I'm not going to break down all of the why, just to say that, I do think that in terms of electability and getting additional votes, I think that she would be a very good option for him. She's got kind of that star appeal. She's very attractive. She's well-spoken. She's female. I know I hate to bring up, identity politics stuff, but when it comes to elections, that does kind of matter to a certain extent. So those are the options. I am not impressed with the ones that he has allegedly narrowed down to his short list, and I think that it is a mistake. I do. But that wouldn't be the first time that Trump has selected people that are a mistake. So let's hope that these reports are false. Let's hope that he is floating it out there to see how his base reacts. And I hope that his base, instead of kissing his ass, will say, hey, not those. Okay? Can we get something else? And that brings me to the natural next big story. And that is that Donald Trump will be speaking at the Libertarian National Convention. What? What? I mean, this is so crazy to me. I mean, he's just for the libertarian audience. Let me start by saying, yeah, Trump bad. Okay, calm down. But like, he's pretty much irrefutably one of the most, if not the most famous person in the world. The fact that he wants to come and speak to us is jaw-dropping. But now that I've said that, let me say, I told you so. I've been saying this. I told this to Anomaly. I've been saying this to anybody that'll listen. The reason that RFK Jr. and Vivek Ramaswamy and a handful of other presidential contenders were doing the podcast circuit so aggressively, RFK Jr., sorry, that's the other one I wanted to mention. The reason that they're doing the podcast circuit so aggressively is because they are trying to reach the actual persuadable, politically interested, but also kind of nonpartisan people out there, which my audience, Dave Smith's audience, all of us, Tom Woods, all of us have audiences that are at least somewhat persuadable because we're not total ideologues. We actually think for ourselves. We're astute. We actually follow politics, but we hate everything that's going on. So you can either we will stay home or we'll vote for the Libertarian, or some of us will occasionally throw a vote towards the GOP. I did it with Ron Paul. That's the only time I voted for the GOP in the presidential elections, but it's interesting, man. It's very, very interesting. I think that Trump speaking at the National Convention will be, undoubtedly the biggest moment in Libertarian Party history in terms of actually one of our events. It's enormous. There are also rumors that Vivek will be there, that RFK Jr. will be there, that I will be there. Can you believe it? I'm kidding. I will be there. I am running for the vice presidency, but I am just amazed. I'm just amazed. I want to give a quick shout out to Angela McArdle for making it happen. I think it's really, really amazing that she managed to pull that off. I'm really surprised, but I shouldn't be, because as I said, they do need our votes. So anyways, that's the main message I want to get to you guys is there's a real defeatist attitude when it comes to the Libertarians and the Libertarian Party. We're never going to win. And if we play ball with either of the two parties, then we've given up everything, and it's okay, but we're never going to win. So what are we giving up? Right? It's a paradox. And my answer to that is, look, we have immense influence. In fact, in my opinion, we have more influence than Trump's base. Hear me out. His base is going to vote for him no matter what. So what really matters are the people that may or may not support him. And because we are the type that may or may not, and most of us will not, they really want to reach us. Just like RFK Jr. considered running for the presidency under the Libertarian Party. Now, he was doing that for ballot access, but he was also doing it because he knows that we are a major voting bloc. We are a major voting bloc that can actually be persuaded. So they think that they're going to persuade us. I got some rough news for you, Don. If you come in there and you don't own your record, if you don't actually make clear what happened in 2020, who was responsible, how will prosecutions be prosecuted? How will they be pursued? Who will be your AG? Who will be your VP? What are you doing? What happened? Like, if you bluff and bluster and you just go, oh, senile old Joe. I can't do an impression right now. I have to hear it and then I can do an okay one, but I can't right now. Anyways, if you tell the truth, or at least it sounds as if you're telling the truth, then you might get through there and persuade some of the people there. If you get up there and you just give a standard stump speech like you give to your actual sycophant fans, the ones that like will vote for you no matter what you do, no matter, take the guns, due process later, no matter shipping munitions to Ukraine, no matter the fact that you greenlit behind the scenes the $100 billion foreign aid package, those people, they don't matter. I'm talking about the people that do matter, the ones that might or might not vote for you. They are going to expect you to tell the truth. And if you get up there and you don't, you're going to get booed mercilessly. Now, take this as friendly advice. I do not mean it to come off as aggressive. I don't mean it to come off as lecturing. I mean it as in like, hey, we need someone to tell the truth. I gave a speech in Maryland 2 weekends ago. That was the entire focus of it. Maybe it was just last weekend. I don't know. Time's a blur. Anyways, point being, I gave a speech. The entire focus of the speech was the people broadly are just seeking honesty. They just want someone to be sincere, someone to tell the truth. I've pointed this out many times. This is the reason Tucker Carlson is so successful. This is the reason Joe Rogan's so successful. Dave Smith, a whole bunch of people. Like, the reason they have not just big audiences, but increasingly big audiences is because it's so obvious that they are at least trying to tell the truth. Do they get everything right? No. Joe Rogan, certainly not. Tucker Carlson, certainly not. Dave, yes, he gets everything right, but that's because he's libertarian. It's different story. But anyways, I think that's what the electorate broadly is seeking. Like, those that are on the fence, those are the people that you're actually trying to get, right? They're the people that have already realized that the game is based off deception. They're the ones that realize that they've been lied to egregiously for years. Many of them just woke up. Many of them were like Neo in the Matrix, and then in 2020, sometime in August, they all went and they snapped out of it, and they were like, what the fuck just happened? Some of them, it was even more recent. Some of them, it was after their third bing bing. I'll just say that because I still don't know what I can say. They just woke up, okay? So, like, these people are pissed, and they want answers, and they want truth, and they want sincerity. If you don't give them that, they will discard you, and they should. They should never listen to you again. And honestly, that's kind of where I'm at, where you've lied to me enough times that I'll never believe you. But if you want to try and win this election in November, it's incumbent upon you, if you want to defeat the incumbent, to tell the truth. You have to make clear what happened in the last year of your presidency. You have to make clear how you will remedy it. And it can't just be, I'm the best, everything I did was great, the $7 trillion that we printed in 2020, it's all good, has no impact on the inflation. No. You have to clarify, especially in a libertarian audience, especially with a bunch of Austrian economics wonks sitting there, where we go, hey, dude, you're not going to lay all of the inflation that we've been experiencing at the feet of Biden. None of us are dumb enough to believe that. We all know that you, along with Joe, along with Janet Yellen, and all these other scumbags are responsible for the inflation that we're dealing with. So why? Why? And how will you fix it? I think the reason I dedicated this much time to this topic is because I think he is the favorite to be the next president of the United States. I do. I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing. I'm just telling you my honest opinion. I think he is probably going to be the next president of the United States. So the fact that he wants to do that and the fact that he wants to speak to us means that it's very important that we tell him exactly what we want to see. You don't just let him lead you around by the nose. Instead, you say, hey, dude, how about Julian Assange? How about Ross Ulbricht? How about Roger Ver, who was just locked up on BS tax charges? Edward Snowden. just a handful. How are you going to avoid World War III? How about that? How are you going to, I don't know, defend the dollar, get inflation down to zero, something? Can you actually address any of these things, or is it strictly going to be a finger pointing exercise at Joe Biden? Because, spoiler alert, we already know Joe Biden fucking sucks, okay? We don't really need to hear that. We need to hear why you sucked in 2020 and what you can actually do to fix it. And if you have an answer to that, I'll listen. And if you don't, and you duck it, and you do what you do with your base, then I'm going to boo. And by the way, I may actually end up speaking to the guy. So believe me when I tell you, I am going to try with all of my might to present our actual concerns about Donald Trump to Donald Trump himself. I hope that happens. I do the show with Luke, Best Political Show. If we get him on, I've already put in inquiries. I've also RFK Jr.'s people. Like, I'm trying. Vivek, he and I are in good terms already, so maybe that could happen. But I'm going to challenge everybody that I encounter out there, because I think it's do or die time, folks. Like, we need answers to these things. We're talking about really catastrophic financial circumstances and catastrophic geopolitical circumstances, like both. And as long as he's the favorite to be the next president of the United States, we need to wield all of the influence we have. We need to stop being allergic to having some semblance of success here. And I'm not telling you to sacrifice your principles. I'm certainly not telling you to vote for Donald Trump. I'm just saying, try and make your voice heard, but make it heard in a productive way. Like, if he says good things, don't just boo out of an obligatory fashion because of what he did in 2020. If he says things that we want to hear, encourage him. He's that type of dude. He likes to hear the audience go, "Oh, they like this. Okay, I'm going to give them more of it." Well, try and use that to actually get him to change his policies, because I think he's likely to be the guy that's setting policy come January of next year. What a weird world. What a weird world. Just to show you, it's not just me that's pissed off. We actually do have a handful of representatives that also seem to share our anger about everything that's going on. Here's Representative Chip Roy with a rant for the ages. Today's episode of Liberty Lockdown is once again brought to you by Crowd Health. Health insurance can be confusing, expensive, and unbelievably frustrating. It is for me. I despise it. But you have an option out there that is superior to the current system, and you get to work with a group of people, in fact, a crowd of people that can help you pay for your health insurance or health care needs when they may arise. For $175 for an individual or $575 for a family of 4 or more, you'll get access to a community of people who are willing to help out in the event of an emergency. You'll get access to telemedicine visits, discounted prescriptions, and so much more without doctors' networks getting in the way. And of course, you'll join the crowd, a group of members just like you who want to help pay for each other's unexpected medical events. Let Crowd Health help with your healthcare needs. Get started today for just $99 per month for your first 3 months by using code LOCKDOWN at joincrowdhealth.com. Crowd Health is not insurance. Learn more at joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com, code LOCKDOWN.
I work for 750,000 Texans. I respond to them, to God, and the Constitution of the United States. I do not work for anybody in this chamber. I do not work for any organization. I don't work for any donor. I work for the people. And I work for a people who are sick and damn tired of this institution run by a bunch of people who campaign saying one thing and they get here and do another. $34.5 trillion of debt, $1 trillion every 3 months. We already spend more on interest than our defense. We're about to crack $1 trillion of interest. They say we will hit $2 to $3 trillion of interest by 2030. Our borders are wide open. We have kids dying. We had Austin, Texas. 4 more people the other night died from fentanyl poisoning. A bunch of others had to be resuscitated with Narcan. The people of Texas are continuing to deal with thousands of people pouring across the border. It's not in the headlines right now because universities are in the headlines. But everybody in Texas who are reeling from inflation, who can't afford a car, who can't afford their home, who can't afford the interest on their mortgage, who can't afford to buy groceries, who are dealing with crime on their streets, who are dealing with open borders, they all want some sort of sanity coming out of this institution. And what do? What do Republicans do in all of their infinite wisdom? We fund more of it. We fund the Department of Homeland Security again. We give the FBI a brand new $200 million headquarters. You can't even make this stuff up. We give more power to the intelligence community to spy on Americans. Don't even protect Americans with warrants. You can't even make it up. Over the last 16 months, there has been a battle which represents the larger war brewing within the Republican Party, because unfortunately my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are so far gone down the rabbit hole of radical progressive policies that absolutely destroy our country every single day, littering our country with regulations, littering our country with all sorts of crime, littering our country with open borders, engaging in endless wars, all of the stuff that is happening because our Democratic colleagues are frankly undermining the American dream and undermining Western civilization and undermining everything we hold dear. There's been a battle going on for the soul of the party and the country within the Republican Party. And I want to tell you, I'm not in the majority. I'm not. You say, Chip, you're in the majority in the House. You have a razor-thin majority. No, I'm not. I'm not in the majority. I'm in the minority. A minority of Republicans who try to wake up here and change this place rather than just campaign on.
He's telling you the truth. Now, you don't have to agree with all of his prescriptions. You don't even have to agree with all of his complaints. But I want to encourage everybody out there that if you are casting a vote for any candidate, that if they don't have that kind of exasperation, if they aren't just totally worn down by the criminality and the corruption and the just stupidity of everything that's happening in DC right now, don't vote for them. Don't. This is the main reason I like Vivek so much, is because he actually spoke to this stuff. This is the main reason I love Thomas Massie, because not only does he speak to this stuff, but he also votes in alignment with his beliefs all the time, as best I can tell. Chip Roy, he's not a libertarian. He doesn't agree with me on everything. He doesn't agree with you on everything. But he's clearly pissed off. And I like that. I like that a lot. And if you like this show, it's probably because you like people that are pissed off, because that's kind of my thing. I'm pretty pissed off, and I know you are too. And you should be. But I think that the bigger point that you should take away from that clip is that what he says there at the end is really important. He says, yeah, I'm a Republican. Yeah, we're the majority, but I'm in the minority. And what he's saying there is that there are 10, maybe 20 congressional representatives that actually align with not just him, but with you. 10 or 20 max out of 435 congresspeople and maybe 1 or 2 out of the Senate. So we're talking 22 at most representatives out of 535. Oh, we're really in trouble. But again, this kind of boils down to the power of the intransigent minority. Will they actually put their feet in the ground? A guy like Matt Gaetz was able to get rid of the speaker. Can a gal like MTG get rid of the current speaker in Mike Johnson after he's betrayed everything that he allegedly believed in? We'll see. This is the power of the libertarians. This is the power of being an intransigent minority. Will you actually stand strong and not acquiesce and not cave and force one of the two evil sides to do your bidding, because otherwise you will not move at all? And I think that's unfortunately the most we can ask for at this point, because unless we get another 50 or 100 Thomas Massie, Chip Roy hybrids in there, we're in a lot of trouble. We're in a lot of trouble. And that's not happening anytime soon. It may never happen, to be honest. So we're going to have to use whatever limited power we have right now to try and swing way out of our weight class. And we'll see. We'll see what happens. Now I'm going to keep this short because I put together like 1,000 different clips, but we're kind of running long already. So I'm just going to play you one. This is in regards to the college campus protests that we've seen recently. This is Senator Tom Cotton.
We're here to discuss the little Gazas that have risen up on campuses across America and the liberal college administrators and politicians who refuse to restore law and order and to protect other students. These little Gazas are disgusting cesspools of anti-Semitic hate, full of pro-Hamas sympathizers, fanatics, and freaks. The terrorist sympathizers in these little Gazas aren't peacefully protesting Israel's conduct of the war. They're violently and illegally demanding death for Israel, just like their ideological twins, the Ayatollahs in Iran.
Jesus, dude. These little Gazas. Oh, man. Want to straw man your opposition a little bit harder there, Tom? God damn, man. That just breaks my heart. To be talking about, I mean, we're talking about tens of thousands of college students that have been protesting all across the country. Well, maybe it's not tens of thousands. Thousands and thousands, for sure. It's a lot. And to just boil down everything that they believe into that they are actually siding with Hamas is just totally unfair. Are there some? Sure, of course. I'd say there's probably more people there that don't even know what the fuck they're there for than those that actually ideologically align themselves with Hamas. Let's be totally fair here. And then there's a lot of people there that, even though they don't know the details, and many of them are pretty fucking stupid, to be honest, they don't like seeing the footage of kids being pulled out of rubble. That's it. That's why they're protesting. Is it all of them? No. Is it most of them? Probably not. Is it some of them? Yeah. And those are good people, because that's a very natural moral reaction to all this madness. And it does not get us closer together. It does not bring us, doesn't get us further away from this, cataclysmic divide that we're currently dealing with in our culture by referring to them as little Hamas, or saying that they ideological brethren with the Ayatollah of Iran. Like, it's just sick. It's just sick. And I just to be clear, this is the same defense I made when Biden was saying crazy things about Trump supporters, or Hillary Clinton was saying crazy things about Trump supporters. You shouldn't be talking about the American people like that. You want to go all in, hard in the paint on your political opponents? Fine, be my guest. You want to go all in, hard in the paint on the media like Donald Trump did? Fine, be my guest. Please do not use the bully pulpit to shame and chastise and ultimately demean and totally mislead your audience as to what these people believe in by saying that they're all just terrorist sympathizing Hamas supporters. It's just not reality. It's not reality. It's totally unfair, and it's really immoral, honestly. It's divisive. It's like, comes across like a dictator would try and, demonize his opposition party. Not just his opposition party, but the supporters of the opposition party. And it just really goes to show once again that these people are aligned with a country other than your own. And that's the truth. And the reason I say that is because 93% of American senators are supported by AIPAC. And for the 15 Republican lawmakers that refused to vote in favor of the $14 billion in aid to the IDF, they have had their funding from AIPAC halted. So I don't know if it could be any more clear that if you don't fund the military-industrial complex, and if you don't fund the IDF, then you will be defunded yourself. And for the life of me, I don't know how that's legal. I really don't understand how this is acceptable, how this doesn't get talked about more often, but it has to stop. Like, you cannot have so much of our political establishment being funded by this one organization that ultimately is committed to a cause that I don't think is in alignment with the vast majority of Americans. Like, do you actually, like, if you actually look at the polls when it comes to funding Ukraine and Israel, it's either very close or it leans towards not funding these wars, depending on which war you're talking about. So, hello, is this okay with you? Do you want a pact that's aligned with another nation to be dictating how your policies are made and where your money goes, or where your debt goes, I guess, since it's not really your money anymore? Oh, man, it's so dangerous. And it could ultimately mean that your sons and daughters end up on the front line fighting Iran, which is totally reprehensible. So that's the reason I speak out against it, regardless of the fact that it's probably not good for my career, because I'm just telling you the truth, which is what I always do. Here's a rare moment of legitimate journalism from the BBC, talking to Anthony Blinken.
The problem is we've now got a catastrophic loss of life in Gaza. And you're sitting here in China where they are managing to paint the United States as hypocrites. You're asking China to stop supplying components, not weapons, components to Ukraine while you're supplying weapons to Israel. So it allows, it erodes the credibility of the United States, not just here in China, but around the world.
She ain't lying. I mean, she did make one mistake. I think what she meant to say is that the Chinese are sending components to the Russians. She said Ukraine. But how can we possibly say, as Secretary of State, how can you actually go to China and tell them, hey, you can't do this, but yeah, we're going to continue to send weaponry to the IDF? It's like, well, yeah, you probably can't. You probably can't. You don't really have much of a moral leg to stand on because you are currently funding one side of three proxy wars if you include Taiwan. So how are you going to turn to China and say, hey, you guys can't do that? And then, by the way, they're not even funding the actual weaponry, but just components. So, yeah, I think that because there's such an obvious double standard when it comes to our foreign policy making and our kind of stewardship to the world and our negotiations with foreign leaders, they're all looking at it like, I mean, they've been looking at it for a long time, but it's just becoming more and more obvious to the average person that, yeah, like there's a double standard here. You're telling them to do something, to not do something that you are currently doing, not in one, not in two, but three different countries. So how could you possibly dictate what they do as a response to that? You shouldn't be able to. And eventually you won't be able to, because our financial circumstances will get so dire that you'll be incapable of doing so. Coming to a theater near you. One more clip I've been trying to play for weeks now, and I finally just have an opportunity to do so. This is Democratic Representative Gerald Connolly from Virginia. Said this about 2 weeks ago.
Some say, well, we have to deal with our border first. The Ukrainian-Russian border is our border. It's the border between depraved autocracy and freedom-loving people seeking our democratic way of life. Do we have a stake in that outcome? Yes. Undeniably, yes. Will we rise to the occasion? Will we stand shoulder to shoulder with our Ukrainian brothers and sisters who for 1,151 days have been holding off the depraved, thuggish dictator Vladimir Putin?
Oh, God. Do you understand why I'm not a globalist? Do you get it now? I mean, once you have that mentality, you can justifiably argue it is our border because ideologically freedom got to stop the deranged tyrant Putin. It's like, no, no, I don't have any actual obligation to defend any other nation. And I don't really have an obligation to defend this nation either, even though I'd be far more readily willing to. Certainly don't have an obligation to defend one corrupt government against another corrupt government 6,000 miles away from where I have spent my entire life. No, 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 no. No, thank you. But I just wanted to play that because I want you to understand that not only do at least half, probably more, of our congressional representatives feel that way, like they honestly feel like they are the police of the world, they are the moral arbiter of all geopolitical affairs all over the planet, but they also represent a lot of Americans that feel the same. And let me tell you, if you don't wake up from that fever dream and realize that you cannot do that indefinitely, then you are going to get reality come smashing into your face. And not far off. Not 20 years from now, not 50 years from now, like no, within a decade. You're going to find out the worst way possible that we cannot continue on this path. We cannot continue to tell the rest of the world how every single affair has to be played out. We can't do it financially. We can't do it militarily. We can't do it culturally. We can't do it socially. Like it's not happening. It's not happening much longer. So we can get real with ourselves and try and avoid either a world war or a financial meltdown. or we can continue to lie to ourselves, and then we can go bankrupt as a nation, and you can see your life savings be obliterated as the U.S. dollar becomes confetti. Take your pick. For me, it's not a hard choice. For me, the obvious, easy choice, if you don't want to see a complete meltdown in this country, is to be fucking honest about the circumstances, as Chip Roy and Thomas Massey and a handful of others have been with you for years now, that we have to change things dramatically, or this train is coming off the tracks. I think it is off the tracks already, to be honest. But it's it's off the tracks and there's a cliff. And we're like halfway off the cliff. So pull off the gas, please. One more clip, then we'll get out of here. Got Nancy Pelosi on MSNBC earlier this week.
And Joe Biden is doing that, created 9 million jobs in his term in office. Donald Trump has the worst record of job loss of any president. So we just have to make sure people know.
That was a global pandemic.
He had the worst record of any president. We've had other concerns in our country. If you want to be an apologist for Donald Trump, that may be your role, but it ain't mine. And he has the worst.
Anybody can accuse me of that.
And Joe Biden is doing that.
Imagine saying that some talking head on MSNBC is an apologist for Donald Trump. No, Nancy. But that's the game, right? Someone points out reality, and like, you just called them the propagandist. In reality, like, Nancy is the propagandist. She's a professional propagandist, along with every Democrat I've heard speak over the past few years. Not voter, but the actual politicians. It's crazy, man. Now, I think that Donald Trump ought to be held responsible for what did transpire in 2020. But you can't say that all of the job losses during that year that were a consequence of the lockdowns and the printing and the insanity that you also supported the entire way. That all of the bad falls on him, none of it on you? He's got the worst job record as any president ever. Okay. That responsibility doesn't fall on anybody else. Now, the funny thing is that the MSNBC talking head is like, well, though we had to lock down because, it was dangerous and pandemic, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just over here like, yeah, we shouldn't have. We shouldn't have done that. But you can't put all the blame on him. And it's just, I just think it's funny because you have like one paid liar versus another paid liar. And they like, even they can't agree on like, all right, that lie's a little bit too bald-faced for us to go along with. It's amazing. It's amazing. Nancy Pelosi found the threshold by which MSNBC felt, you know what, too far. The limits of the depravity. We have finally met them. And it is staring to the void with me. It's concerning, to say the least. If you enjoyed the show, please do share it around with your friends and family. Scare the shit out of your grandparents. Send it to them and have them just have an aneurysm when they realize that, oh, everything's screwed up. That's always fun. Do leave a comment down below. I read them and I try and respond if there's constructive criticism. And hit subscribe. And last but not least, if you want to support my work, you can subscribe at Liberty Lockpod on X. I'll follow you back, or at libertylockdown.logos.com. I'll also follow you back if you let me know over there. Obviously, I mean on X, at Liberty Lockpod. And last but not least, I will see you guys in a couple days. Hug and kiss your mothers. And you know what? I never say anything about your dads. Give your dad a high five. Give him a big old high five. If you're lucky enough to still have him in your life, give your dad a high five and say, thanks for being a savage, Dad. Love you guys. Peace.
Welcome to Liberty Lockdown. Please scan your barcode. Your liberty ain't gone, but yeah, it's on hold. Where did it come from and where did it go?